Good morning, everybody. Ross Allen Skorzewski coming to you live from the studio here at Green Bay, Wisconsin. It's the Wellness Way. It's the corporate office. And I am so excited to be able to share this time with you this morning for another episode, edition, session, like we said last week, whatever you choose to call it, of Wednesday Morning Quick Hits with Ross Allen Skorzewski. Me! Hey, I want to give a big shout out if he's watching right now. I know he's getting ready to either board a plane, leaving on a jet plane, don't know when he'll be back again. Actually, I do know when he'll be back, but Dr. Patrick Flynn is actually en route to South Carolina to spend time with one of our offices. He's getting ready to present, once again, The Hormone Connection, Ending the Battle Between the Sexes, with Dr. Katali and Dr. Seth Strauss. And it's going to be an amazing time. So, Doc, if you're watching or flying, whatever, be safe. Enjoyed the show. We'll talk to you later. Have a great time influencing individuals with the passion that exists on the inside of you. Speak well. With that, ladies and gentlemen, here we are once again on Wednesday morning. It is Hump Day, right? Receive that however you like, because I know for a lot of us, it's all about perspective. Some of you are living for the weekend already, and you're looking forward to Thursday and Friday to end ever so quickly, or you're going to live in the moment and thrive. And that's what this is all about. It's getting you to change your perspective, to give you vital information in the hopes that you would consider implementing a personal growth strategy to continue to take you to bring out that amazing ability and skill sets and qualities, characteristics to bring the best representative of to you and the world around you every day. So with that, once again, grab your cup of joe. Take a sip. It's beautiful. I love coffee. It's a beautiful thing. Like I said, it's got to be organic, though it is here at the Wellness Way, because it's the only way, right? So with that, let's dive in today's session. It's going to be a rather quick one, thus setting the stage for the title of the show, The Quick Hit. What are we going to talk about today? If you saw yesterday with the Facebook reminder, as well as possibly even this morning, if you're diving in right now, it's the idea of when, where, and does it end when it comes to implementing a personal growth strategy that will stand the test of time? Why am I kind of bringing this at this point in time after we've done 6 episodes now? I believe today's the 7th episode. Isn't that correct? The 7th episode of the Quick Hits with me. Here's why. I've been a big advocate over the years of implementing a personal growth strategy, one that would potentially bring about major life change. But there's been something that has always kind of derailed my ability to have a personal growth strategy that would actually stand the test of time. Last week we talked about obstacles, these hurdles, if you will, that are placed in front of us, whether it's self-induced or just because of circumstance or life taking place around us. A lot of times, we go into these ideas, unfortunately, I think it happens from time to time, especially once a year with New Year's resolutions, where we have this idea that we're going to all of a sudden be intentional with a personal growth strategy that is going to set the stage for a better year like we've never experienced before. But unfortunately, a lot of those New Year's resolutions fall flat and we get back to business as usual, or the same old patterns of old kick in. And even though our best intentions are always at the forefront of our mind, that strategy is challenged by our inability to put into motion a really intentional and realistic growth plan that will stand the test of time. I am that person. And maybe you are too. Maybe you're that individual who has had great desires, great aspirations to put into motion something that would stand the test of time. And maybe you're like me, if you have this in the back of your mind, the shoulda, coulda, woulda, if I only would have. And you can look back in that age-old adage of saying, well, hindsight is always 20/20. A lot of us can really, in all honesty, look back and we can see moments where we made great decisions of putting into motion something that would bring about great life change, only to see our own expectations and desires to fall flat because we really were standing on a platform of personal growth that was very frail, that was very shaky, and it would not stand the test of time based on the unrealistic approach that we put into motion. Before I even dive into this a little bit, I'm going to be sticking to this quite a bit today. I was up late last night, and it was hilarious because my mind was running absolutely amok with thoughts, and I was up until almost 2 o'clock in the morning. Dr. Patrick Flynn and I were texting back and forth, sharing thoughts and ideas, and I literally, my mind was, I could not turn it off. That's how excited I was about this today, but also excited but a little nervous, and I'm going to let you know that. Today's episode has me a little nerved because once again, like last week, talking about hurdles and overcoming obstacles, I did a little self-disclosure, and this once again today is another moment of self-disclosure, vulnerability and transparency that I'm going to share from my personal life with you in the hopes to inspire you, to get you to potentially look at where you're at and implementing a very intentional personal growth strategy that will stand the test of time. You know, being an individual who used to work within the church and started off as a youth pastor and a worship leader, moments of teaching that I would bring to youth and even times of teaching within our worship team and stuff like that. A lot of times we would be speaking to, whether it was the youth or even those individuals in the choir, and we would say, well, you know what, I'm preaching to the choir here. And we use that age-old adage even with theirs, saying, I'm preaching to the choir. Why? Because it applies to me. It's something that I either have gone through or I'm going through. And I think that's a great way for me, in my point of communication, to be able to connect with you and to possibly inspire you, is to let you know that if Ross can do it and struggle with it and put it into motion, you can too. I love that. Dr. Patrick Flynn always says a lot of times, hey, for the last 18 to 20 years, I put myself into a place where I just want to work hard. I want to be diligent with the skill sets that I've been given to make a difference in this world. He's not the most intelligent man there is, but if you look at the success that he's brought to the table, it's about the idea that he's never quit. He's never stopped. He's believed in himself, and he's pushed himself, and he's pushed himself, and he's pushed himself. And, for myself, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed either, but the idea that I can be successful in a personal growth track is something that I need to grasp a hold of, believe, implement, and just walk through. So, hey, if I can do this, trust me, you can too. Once upon a time, there was this individual named Ross Skorzewski, and his greatest goal was to bring about a representation of himself to this world that was amazing, that was continually advancing and going forward in overcoming the issues that were within. But I tell you what, like I said, the growth strategies that I implemented, they were good, but they were always really concerned with something that I believe that sets us all potentially up for failure. And that was an immediate return on that investment of personal growth and development. And the notes that I have for you that I want to share with you this morning in this concept of creating a strategic plan to stand the test of time really comes down, at least for me, is having this concept that my investment in the now does not equate an immediate return on that investment. One of the biggest things that I've done over the years is I've set myself up for failure when it comes to personal growth and development, because I believe that if I do something now, I should have an immediate return, immediate response, an immediate validation of that investment in myself that's coming to the world from me. Thus, constantly saying, even within these first 6 episodes, that looking to the world to validate that growth immediately is unrealistic. So part of today is me really sharing with you some basic principles that I believe if today you're watching, or last week we had a comment that was made, I believe it was Erin Walton, and she said, hey, homeschoolers are joining live with you today. And I said, that's amazing. I think that's humbling to me, to be honest with you, that if we have students watching, kids watching this, that a growth plan is just as relevant for them now in their life as it is for me at 43, or possibly you if you're 65 or even 70. A growth plan, if it's strategic and it's intentional, is right for now. So the idea of when do I start? Where do I even begin to implement this plan? And does it ever end? That today is what I'm going to bring to you, but I'm going to do something here real quick as I want to dive on. I want to acknowledge some of you people who are joining with me this morning, because I think that's a good thing. Celeste Patrick, hey, good to see you on this morning. Samantha Brunette, it's good to see you this morning. And my volume's up so I can hear myself. That's kind of odd and strange. Natasha Hansen, Mary Kay, it's good to see you as well. Janelle Marie, Mom! How you doing, Mom? Where are you at this morning? You having a cup of coffee? You're watching me, your son? Thanks. It's a beautiful thing to have you on this morning. But with that, I don't know if I'm going to say this right. Is it Brianna Wolf? Kathy Dart, hi. Yes, I love the palm trees. By the way, a little side squirrel, ant, whatever that might be, distraction. Continue to put in the palm tree. Continue to put in the coconuts. Continue to like and share. We'll get your name entered for our Hawaii giveaway that we have coming up on April 10th. If you join the Dr. Patrick Flynn Show live on April 10th at 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, we will be picking one name to join Dr. Patrick Flynn, myself, and many from our team and some other offices to come to Hawaii with us. We're going to Maui. We're going to be with Dr. Katie Graveson, and we're going to go over there. We're going to do a hormone connection talk, and you can come and spend some time with us and even be a guest on our live episode of the Dr. Patrick Flynn Show live from Maui. So real quick, getting back to when do we start? To be honest with you, there's no time like right now. I don't know, to be honest with you, if it ever comes down to a specific time or a calendar date that we can really be realistic with a proper implementation of this growth strategy that we all should do, this personal growth and development plan. It really comes down to just saying, I need this, and the world needs this around me. Those that I do life with every day deserve this from me, because when we are intentional with developing ourselves and overcoming weaknesses, and to see weaknesses come into strengths, overcoming negative behavioral patterns, turning them into positive behavioral patterns, overcoming negative mindsets, turning them into positive mindsets. I don't know for you if you can actually, just like for me, actually put a calendar date to say, this is when it's going to start, or I'll wait till next month, or I'll wait until New Year's Eve, because I just figure, I might just continue to tarry on because life isn't that bad for now, but maybe something will happen along the way, which it will, I promise you. And a lot of times, I'll tell you this, when the poo hits the fan, a lot of times that's when people realize their greatest need for starting a possible personal growth and development track. And I don't want to be that individual. I don't want to be that individual anymore that allows circumstances to dictate when I actually start to implement developing this. There are 3 questions that constantly permeate the wellness way that have been put into motion. And once again, one of the greatest influencers in my life is my best friend, Patrick Flynn, Dr. Patrick Flynn, and the 3 questions that he has always implemented in his life and that he has saturated into our mindset that has now become part of our core are these 3 questions. What are you doing to develop yourself? What are you doing to develop your family? And what are you doing to develop others around you? So the when, to me, when do you start? Now. Why not now? Why wait for something to spiral out of control? Why wait for conflict? Why wait for tension? Why wait for chaos? Why wait for the poo hitting the fan and creating a mess to all of a sudden have the, holy cow, I need to do something about this. Start now, start today. One of the things about this first question, what are you doing to develop yourself, is really a great question, because really what it really does is it brings us to a place to actually go inward and reflect and to ask ourselves a very crucial question. What are we doing? Are we just living day to day? Are we just making it, hour to hour, minute by minute, and just going through the motions? Or are we intentionally setting ourselves up to succeed every day by wrestling with this existence of who we are, recognizing weaknesses, in the hopes that we would not just be ashamed of those weaknesses and try to mask them and try to put on a front and overcome them, just kind of push them off to the side. But what are we doing to actually intentionally overcome those weaknesses, change mindsets and perspectives, to put into motion our ability to succeed day after day, month after month, and year after year? So when does somebody start to implement a growth strategy that will stand the test of time? There's no time like now, especially being proactive and being intentional, especially when it's a decision that is made at a good stage in your life where things are good, maybe void of tension and chaos and conflict. That is a perfect time. There's no time like right now for you to implement a growth strategy, to begin to even wrestle with some of the words that we've talked about over the last 6 weeks. And here's what it comes down to. Strategic thinking comes with intentional planning. An intentional growth strategy for you is really just making a commitment to yourself, and yourself first and foremost, to do something different about bringing a new result, a new pattern of existence in your life. You have to be intentional with this. It starts with a thought, but then it's backed up by action. We have to do something. If we decide, yes, I'm going to do something in regards to personal growth and life development and life change, we have to be intentional with actually putting into motion a plan. And what does that plan even look like? Maybe it's being intentional with getting some wonderful material to read. Some of the great names that I can think of that have inspired me over there: John Maxwell, Stephen Covey. There's lots. Even if you're going on the spiritual realm, Joel Osteen, some of the great pastors out there who put out wonderful materials. Find something that's going to speak to you, that's going to challenge your thoughts, challenge your current existence, to bring about some new perspectives. But as you get this information, don't just read it. Be intentional with actually putting into motion the precepts and the concepts that are being given to you. Create that action plan. So the when is start now, but you have to not only just start with a thought, you put into motion something that is actually going to give you fuel and a strategic plan to actually execute in bringing these new life patterns into existence. And by the way, when you do this, you must go inward, you must reflect, and you must put to death the negative, stinking thinking that continues to course through your brain that tells you this isn't going to work because it didn't work the last time. It didn't work the time before. You tried, and you dropped the ball, and it didn't work, and it failed. This went wrong, that went wrong, this went wrong. Well, you know what? That's just life. And I, even at 42, realize that that's just how it's going to be. But it does not dictate whether or not my growth strategy is effective. When do you start? Now. Where do you start? You start with you first. There was a song, if you're here in the corporate office from time to time on a Friday, Dr. Mitch Sutton, he's always walking around, he loves his Fridays. Why? Because he plays Michael Jackson all the time, and it's just crazy. It's like Michael Jackson is the theme for Fridays. And all I could think about was Man in the Mirror, the song. And, go back and YouTube if you're young enough, or if you're too old to remember the song, go back and look at YouTube, Michael Jackson, Man in the Mirror, and he talks about starting with change. But you got to start with that man in the mirror or that woman in the mirror, because where do you start? You start with you, and that's why it's the first question that we always have here at the Wellness Way with all of our offices is, what are you doing to develop yourself? Are you reading books? Are you putting new information in to challenge the broken information that you've held on to for years? Or bringing in new thoughts that are going to challenge broken thoughts that you've embraced, that have been spoken over you, or that have been brought into your life through environmental influences? What are you doing to challenge that current representation of who you are to bring about the new version of you? What stands to potentially get in your way of actually being successful with keeping your growth strategy in motion? For me, I'm going to tell you, sure, I get it. When do you start? You start now. Where do you start? You start with you. But what stands to potentially get in your way? I've asked myself this question many times, and the problem is I know the answer, but for many years, I've never really done anything about the answer because it's a frustrating answer, because my answer, my obstacle, my hurdle is me. What stands to potentially get in your way of throttling or sabotaging your growth strategy? For me, it's me. Because I have such a high level of expectation on myself, a high standard of perfection, such a high and lofty goal, that sometimes I've set that so stinking high that when I don't see, like I even said just a little bit ago, that immediate return or that immediate change, I begin to already think that it's not working and that it's a failed approach, and therefore I become discouraged and I take myself out of the game. What is it that is in your way? What is the one thing that potentially distracts you from being able to actually execute a long-term growth strategy? Is it you? Is it someone who's in your life that is speaking a negative message over you, who is challenging this growth strategy, that's telling you it's not working? And I would say, even if that is the case, consider the source, number one. Consider the source and be very careful with who it is that you allow to come into your life to validate whether your growth strategy is actually working or not. Because maybe that individual has no concept of personal development and growth, and maybe that person has no right to speak into that area of your life. So when it comes down to this question, what is the obstacle that potentially gets in your way of being able to maintain this wonderful life-giving growth strategy? When does it begin? Now. Where does it begin? It begins with you. But in the midst of this, when we do begin this, and when we're intentional with reading the proper materials to inspire new thoughts, to inspire new plans backed with action, what is going to come along that's going to potentially derail you? And I believe one of the things is this. I'm an emotional individual. I really am. And for those that do life with me every day, they know this, they see this, and sometimes it's highs, it's lows, and sometimes, well, I'm never really even keeled, but I'm a very emotional individual. But when I am intentional about putting something into motion, into motion, there's a great deal of emotion that goes along with it. So when I put into motion a growth strategy, my desire is that I am fully engaged on a passionate level, and there's a lot of emotion, and I'm looking for that response in return, not only from myself, but also with others. But my emotions, a lot of the times, when I know that I'm my biggest hurdle and I'm my biggest obstacle that gets in the way of me being consistent with this growth strategy, is misplaced emotion when it comes to as to why I should continue or why I should stop. My emotions, a lot of times, even though they're very well intended, can also be the very thing that potentially cause me to wrestle with myself. And I'm the first person to potentially send a false message that says, you know what, this isn't working. You're not worth it. You screwed this up, you screwed that up. Like you said, you tried before, so why try again? It's like no matter what I do, it's just not good enough. And I want to say this, intentionality when it comes to personal growth and development, it comes down to the idea, this commitment that you make to yourself is one that is going to be, yes, infused with emotion, but your emotion does not dictate whether whether you make it through, you start or you stop. Your emotion doesn't always validate the next action. We've had this saying all the time, and I've said it to teenagers and I've said it to other couples, do what is right versus what feels right. And when it comes to personal growth and development, I'm going to tell you this, there's a lot of growth that takes place, especially when we go inward and we reflect and we start with ourselves first. There comes some reflection that brings about pain. But this pain is all about us challenging the mindsets, challenging the existence of who we are today, putting to death broken messaging, putting to death these mindsets and these behavioral patterns, which therefore isn't always fun and it doesn't feel good. Emotion. I'm a guy that brings the emotion to the table, and whether I feel like it or not has caused me to make some very unfortunate decisions over the years, and it has been the thing that has derailed me from being consistent and seeing a growth strategy through. So today for you, where are you at? Are you starting? Have you started? Where are you starting? You're starting with yourself first, and where are your emotions at? How do your emotions come into play with your ability to actually succeed in seeing your growth strategy through? Where is your commitment level at? What is your validation to that commitment? Is it based on feelings and emotions, or is it based on intentional strategic planning that sees the big picture versus the short game with an immediate return on that investment? I, unfortunately, for years, have been very short-sighted, looking for the immediate return, hours maybe, minutes even, after reading great information, expecting to think that just because I read something, it's going to equate into life change. But I don't feel as if anything has ever happened. I don't see the change right away. And I've had a very unrealistic perspective as to what that investment was to bring about. The investments that we make in ourselves every day in regards to personal growth and development need to be no different than that of the mindset of somebody puts their money in the stock market one day to think that it's going to have a high return by tomorrow, and you can withdraw that and you can capitalize and you can see that investment grow exponentially overnight is unrealistic. It's no more unrealistic as it was for my mindset to think that just because I read great material and was inspired through great personal growth and development leadership material that it would have, with the snap of a finger, an immediate return on that investment. It takes time. It takes consistency. And it takes a very even-keeled approach to understanding that the investment that you're making into yourself today is going to have great returns months and years in the making. Nobody invests their money into the market or into a startup thinking that they're going to have an immediate return tomorrow. If they do so, they are sadly disappointed, as I have been over the years with personal growth and development. So the idea of having a very intentional understanding of where your emotions are at, where your feelings are at, where you're gauging whether you are succeeding at this personal growth track that you are on, where are you placing that? How are you validating whether what you are doing is succeeding or not? I would say this, and I would ask you this as I've done this. I have people intentionally placed in my life to be the voice in my ear that are validating that what I'm doing is either working or not. But these are people that I have placed in my life. Dr. Patrick Flynn, even the individuals that I work with, my wife, even Bree, my CEO and my boss, who has a great degree of insight to see whether or not the growth strategy that I am implementing and wanting to put into place is working or not. Because she'll see it in the work ethic. Who's speaking into your life? Do they have a proven track record of success? And I think that's also when it comes to when we start now, great, love it, let's be intentional with it, let's commit to ourselves, let's get our feelings and emotions in check to make sure that we're doing what is right versus what feels right. Let's have realistic expectations on this investment into ourselves, realizing that it's not an immediate return, but that it's something that's going to take time and consistency and patience, perseverance to be steadfast on this personal growth track. But then along the way, who do you have surrounding you that is going to speak into your life with a proven track record, who's been consistent, that can really validate whether or not what you're doing is bringing about life, or maybe you're stuck and you've plateaued and you need to be pushed, or it's a strategy that is not appropriate for where you're at, therefore maybe you need to retweak, retool, or even possibly recommit because you've stopped. I think having the key people in your life, the right people to speak into your life during your growth track, developing who you are to bring the best representation of who you are to the world that you do life in every day, having those key people in your life are absolutely vital. It's absolutely crucial. Because that's where trust, that's where vulnerability and transparency, that's where the iron sharpens iron can come in, because that individual, like I said, with a proven track record, because they've been where you are and they've made it through to the next level, that they can pull you along, coach you, inspire you, and hold you accountable. Part of this really does come down to as well is realizing that in order to stand the test of time for your growth strategy, is making sure that your end goal is realistic. When do you start? Now. Where do you start? With you. When does it end? That's a good question. When does your growth strategy end? When does mine end? Let me ask you this. Are you at your full potential right now in life? Is Ross at his full potential right now? Because if this is all that, if this is as good as it gets, I'm going to be very bummed. I'm going to be sadly disappointed if this is as good as it gets, because I believe that there's so much more to this individual at 43 years old than what I've brought to the table so far. When does this personal growth track, this personal growth strategy, this trajectory in life, when does it end? When do you think? When you're pushing up daisies. When you're in the pine box. When you have reached the other side. That's when it ends. So I think a lot of this, when it comes down to understanding a personal growth and development track that's going to stand the test of time, really comes with a realistic expectation that it never ends. It never stops. The moment we think that we have arrived, I think that's when things really begin to go wrong. Is that we've lost sight of what this idea of personal growth and development is all about. We never fully attain greatness at any point in time. I believe greatness is something that we achieve because we're constantly pursuing that next great expression of ourselves in the world that we do life in every day. Life's going to happen. The people that come in and out of your life are going to happen. Jobs possibly change throughout the years. Frustration comes and it goes. Good times are had, bad times are had. And I think about the marital covenant. You know, we go back to this idea of what is commitment. And I think to myself, when we talk about committing to a growth track, it's the idea that it's going to be, if we were to take the marital covenant and actually swap it around and implement it towards your own commitment to do this personal growth and development track, it would be for richer or for poorer, through sickness and in health, through good times and bad times, until when? Death do us part. Which means that there is going to be struggle. There are going to be good times. There are going to be bad times. So to think that at any point in time in your existence on this ball of dirt that you have fully arrived and fully attained the greatest representation of yourself is kind of an absurd thought. And if that is the case, let me know when you arrive. Let me know that day. Send me a text. You could actually private message. Say, nope, I'm there. This is as good as it's going to get. I don't ever want to come to that place in my life where Ross just says, you know what? I can hang my hat up and say, this is as good as it gets. Because at that point in time, you just might as well quit. Because I believe that life should be lived into the fullest. I think that we should push the giftings, push the skill sets until we are in that pine box. Self-betterment. It is an investment that we intentionally bring to ourselves until the day that we die. It's consistency. It takes great intentionality. One, change occurs when you intentionally start with yourself, okay? I said the 3 questions. What are you doing to develop yourself? Thank you, Dr. Patrick Flynn, for that, because it's a question that I chew on every day, and I wrestle with it too. What are we doing to develop our family members? And 3, to help develop others around you. Start with yourself and believe that you are worth the investment. Believe that you're worth the investment, regardless of past starts and stops, past successes and past failures. Believe that you are worth the investment. Well, I don't have time. Yes, you do. You do have time. And if you don't start with yourself, you can't expect the world to change for you when you're not willing to change yourself. You are worth this investment into yourself. Number two, you've got to believe that you can really take yourself from the platform that you exist today to a better place tomorrow. But be very careful with the kind of people that you let speak into this growth track. Three, you have to commit to this growth without an expectation of an immediate return. Do your best. Keep your feelings in check. Keep your emotions in check. Do what is right versus what feels right, and follow through. If there's anything that even Ross needs to get through his mind, is the idea of following through, realizing that this investment is one for the ages. That when I start to think about legacy, my investment now, it doesn't create legacy for tomorrow. Legacy for me is that I start now and I follow through and I'm committed to this, doing what is right versus what feels right, knowing that at the day when I potentially put myself, actually I wouldn't put myself in the pine box, somebody else would, that people would look back and say, he did what was necessary to continually push himself and to advance himself and to bringing to the table the best representation of who he was, to use the skill sets and abilities that he had to leave an imprint on this world. And be so ever gracious with yourself. But yet, don't be so gracious to the point where you allow yourself to just become complacent. That's the idea and the mindset that you think that you've arrived, or all of a sudden that great growth is being had so you can just put on cruise control and ride that growth out for a little while. No, be ever tenacious. Be so quick to make sure that the successes today push you on to the successes tomorrow. Don't relax, don't breathe. That's one of the things that I've done throughout the years is I see great growth and then I get comfortable. I love what Dr. Patrick Flynn said. He said it in a training months ago, and it was months ago. I've only been here not even a full year yet. He said, you know what? I have come to a place in life where I am, oh, son of a gun. You ever have a brain fart and I have the back part of it, but I don't have the first part. That's the positivity of writing things down. Nancy, what is it? It's don't ever, but not satisfied. Learn, thank you very much. That's what I love having the peanut gallery here at Fancy Nancy and Lizzie, because I'll get my brain back on track. Be content, but never satisfied. One of my problems is that I got to the point where I saw growth, but then all of a sudden I became content. And I started to slow down, and I started to become comfortable with this idea of, I like this, I like this, I like this, life is good, I like me, and I get content, and I stall my growth, and instead of advancing and committing to the bigger picture, I get caught up in that immediate gratification, and my growth slows down. And that intentional plan for long-term thinking stops. And then all of a sudden, I hit rock bottom again. I'm like, what just happened? And I think to myself, what just happened is you got content. You saw growth come into your life, and you started to ride that wave of success and happiness, and you stopped growing, and then you crashed. Love it. Be content, but never satisfied. In this growth strategy, when you start now, when you start to invest in yourself and you start to see momentary glimpses of success and wonderful weaknesses becoming strengths and peace come into your life, don't be content. Don't become complacent, because that's the moment when life is going to throw you a curveball. You might stumble and you might fall, but if you're not pushing through to the next level and you're plateauing, it's going to cause you to go, holy cow, and then it's like you got to start all over again. You might stumble, you might fall, but recommit. If that has happened to you, as it has happened to me, recommit, but be strategic, be realistic, and know that when you do experience moments of validation to this growth strategy, that you can be content and you can like it, and you can be at peace with yourself. You can pat yourself on the back, and the world might even do so a little bit along the way, but you're never satisfied. That concept of being content but never satisfied is going to push you through to the next level. It's going to help you see the bigger picture when it comes to really bringing about a growth strategy that will stand the test of time. So have like-minded individuals in your life that you share your aspirations with, that will help hold you accountable, that will keep you committed, and will add value to you as you're growing. Even in the midst of your failures during your growth track, these people that are intentionally placed into your life, even in the midst of your failures, they will still speak life. They will bring value to your growth track. They will tell you, no. Sure, it's a momentary glitch, but you know what? Don't stop. Don't quit. Because it's not worth it. Because if you stop now and you quit, at some point in time, you're going to feel compelled to start that growth track again. And that's where, for me, it's like you live, man, I wish I would have 20 years ago. Man, I wish I would have 15 years ago. I wish I would have a year ago stuck it out. I wish I would have been intentional. I wish I wouldn't have stopped because, man, I bet the person that I am today would be so different, would be so much more confident, so much more powerful, so much more influential in the world that I do life with, whether it's for me as a father, as a husband, as a coworker. Get yourself to a place where you realize, when do you start? Now. Where do you start? With you. When does it end? Just be okay with the idea that it never does end. It never does end. It's continual. Be content but never satisfied. Another quote. Why do I use these quotes with Doc? Because they stick out in my mind. We have these intentional trainings. And he was talking, I'm not going to really quote it, maybe I'll just paraphrase it, talking about the idea of people who are in a growth strategy, whether it's in the workplace environment, growing together, the idea that, yeah, you might fail along the way, but it's those who have repeated failure, those are the ones that aren't growing. Repeated and repeated and repeated failure. I know that growth track. I know that pattern. I don't want to live there. I don't want to be the individual that experiences growth, but then failure that leads to a broken mindset, fueled by emotion that leads to quitting. I don't want that. Do you want that? Absolutely not. Do you want your kids to have that? Absolutely not. So when we think about this ability to bring about this best representation of ourselves, for Ross to bring the best representation of himself to the world that he does life with every day, that you do life with every day, you can never quit. You can never quit. You've got to be that example. You've got to start with you. You've got to see it through. Be intentional. Be ever so wary of your emotions leading you to doing what is right or what feels right. It never ends. It never stops. Surround yourself with like-minded people. Stay the course. Never stop. This is me. This is me today. It could be you today. And all I can say is this: please, for the love of Joseph, and for those that do life with you, as those that do life with me, don't quit. Be intentional. Read great information, but don't let it just stay as information that inspires you for a moment but falls flat because there's no action behind it to truly bring about the change that you desire. The change that we desire, it takes time. It takes consistency. It takes the right people in our life to make sure that they are going to hold us accountable. When you start speaking your goals, your aspirations, your desires to those people who belong in that posture in your life to speak into you, they're going to hold you accountable to it. When you start speaking it out loud and you put it on paper, you're going to start putting into motion something that you know that somebody else is going to hold you accountable. And that's a good thing. That is a very good thing. Like I said, it's a quick hit this morning. These are more thoughts that I've been wrestling with, even with myself, and wrestling even up until 2 o'clock this morning to be able to share with you today. Do me a favor, in your comments, please. I do love your comments. I appreciate those of you who say, hey, I so needed to hear this. Oh, this spoke to me right now. Or thank you so much. Hi from this place, hi from that place. Ask me a question. Let me know, possibly. You can even do it anonymously. Find me. It's Ross Allen Skorzewski. Find me and send me a message. Say, hey, I'm thinking about this. I'm going through this. What are your thoughts? What are your perspectives? I would love to be able to address some of those questions that you might have on this show instead of making it all just about me. I'm curious. What are your thoughts? What are your struggles? Maybe they're similar to mine. Maybe they're not. But let's continue to do life together. Let's continue to push ourselves. Let's continue to be intentional with putting into motion a growth strategy that will stand the test of time. But the one that stands the test of time, like I said, truly I believe has an equal balance of understanding commitment and emotion and feelings that go into this. Do what is right versus what feels right. Be careful, guard your heart. Let only the right people that can truly speak based on being somewhere that you were, but with a proven track record to help you get through where you're at to the next level where they are. And just be content, but never satisfied. With that, I thank you for spending this time with me. For my random thoughts, maybe a little all over the place, but hey, once in a while, that's Ross. That's me. I've got heads nodding over there like, yep, that was all over the place. Like bing, 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 bing. Hey, that's what happens when you do life with me from time to time. Thank you. We'll see you next Wednesday.